Being stunned and disappointed in life has caused many to walk away from their faith. I've been there. When I received my diagnosis of terminal brain cancer, when my dad passed away suddenly, way too soon, I remember it when I almost folded on my faith for the first time. So I was at work and I got a call from my sister, and she just said, "Jay, Dad passed away." And it was this moment of shock where I couldn't believe it. And I went to my administrative assistant and said, I've got to go. I've got to go home. I just found out my dad died, and I walked out. And the shock of that moment just rocked me. Not just the moment, but everything that came after. Days after, weeks after, months after, I couldn't wrap my head around why God would allow this to happen. And so I did the only thing I knew to do. When I wrestle with God, I typically go away and I fast and I pray. And so I drove out to one of my dad's favorite camping spots in Central California. And there I fasted and I prayed and I heard nothing from God. I got no sense of comfort from God. And I was angry. But I stayed there and I wrestled. For 3 days, I fasted and I prayed, and finally I gave up. Finally, I said, I'm done, I'm leaving, I'm angry, and my faith was just barely holding on. How could a good God take my dad when we needed him so much at that moment? There's so much going on, and we needed the rock of our family, and now he was gone. And I left, barely holding on to my faith. And as I drove home, this long stretch of highway, desert on both sides, nothing. And I was listening to music. I was listening to angry music. I was listening to angry music very loudly. So I couldn't hear anything else. So I couldn't feel anything else. But then God's voice broke through. And this inspiration came to me. I couldn't see it through the tears in my eyes, but he brought clarity and just reminded me that he'd been there before. But on the even more terrible side, that God the Father lost his son. He watched his son Jesus being crucified, being executed by the very people that he was sent to serve. And God hated death. God knew the pain of death. God knew my pain. And I realized this. Not only did God empathize with me, not only did God hate death even more than I hated death, not only did God hate seeing me in pain, but God, my Father, was willing to do something about it. He sent his son Jesus to die as a sacrifice and defeat death so that we all could have eternal life when we put our faith into Jesus. And he allowed his son to go through that pain so that my faith could be built up, so that my life could be saved, so my dad's life could be saved for all of eternity. And I had gone out to the mountain to fast and pray, barely holding on to my faith. I left that mountain even more discouraged, but on this empty stretch of the highway, my God spoke to me and he built up my faith. So much so that years later, when I was diagnosed with terminal cancer, my faith was strong enough to hear that. Now, I wrestled with God. I needed to figure some things out. But I had a core belief, and my faith was strong enough not to walk away from God, but to turn to him. Look, we're never promised that following Jesus will save us from suffering. On the contrary, God tells us not to be surprised when we suffer because we follow Jesus. The Bible even goes as far to tell you to rejoice when we suffer as a Christian because it's an honor to bear that name.